Good morning, folks, and welcome to the Sense of Things for this week. Jeff and Ron here. We're going to have a fun episode today where Ron is going to share with us some fun names of towns across the country. I'm going to do a little bit of a piece on the kind of all the factors that the Fed looks at, where they're pointing right now, and why I think that they are going to run the same movie that they always have, which is to wait too dang late and throw the economy into a mess. Ron and I disagree on that, but you'll get to hear that. Ron's got some great stuff on credit card balances again, got some other information on the market. So stay tuned. We'll be right back on in just a second for a spirited debate. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the show. It's Jeff and Ron here. Ron, how are you doing, buddy?
Good morning. I promise I didn't send you a picture of what shirt I was going to wear today.
There you go. I know. Yeah. I was like, oh, yeah, you are right. Mine's just one color. Yours has got the little cross hatches to it. So.
I got to have a little texture in there.
It's our uniform of the day. Come on.
I hear you. I hear you.
You've got some fun stuff to kick us off, right?
Yeah, look, there's always something going on every week, and the presidency likes to have a reality show and be in the news every day. They said there was a call with Xi, and that he initiated, but no new news, and the White House hasn't confirmed.
Yeah.
So we'll have to see what.
And I think it's interesting with the whole Putin situation. It sounds like the president's he's been holding off the Senate on putting sanctions out there, but quite frankly, I think that's the only way you're going to stop Putin is just to take away the money from him at this point. And really, the only thing they export is energy. If you pound on everybody that's buying his energy, it takes some supply offline, but I think the Middle East probably can make up for that. So
I think their two biggest industries is energy and malware.
Yeah. I'm not sure if they export the malware as much as import.
I said industry.
It is an industry, yes, they do, and they import the money from using the malware. But
absolutely,
yeah.
All right, you ready?
Yeah, let's learn about some city names.
Okay, this was in Parade Magazine online, and I saw these names, and I'm going through it. So I'm going to identify what I thought were the more interesting ones out of the 75. I'll give the full list. People could pause it and read it on their own. But I thought this was probably the most interesting names. Big Bottom, Washington.
Yeah.
ZZYZ, California.
So let me just, before we go any farther, Big Bottom, Washington. So is the theme song for the town Big Bottom Girls from AC/DC?
I don't know. It could be. Santa Claus, Indiana. I wasn't aware of that one.
Okay.
Lick Skillet. And you would think these two towns would be next to each other. Needmore, Alabama, and Hygiene. So it would be Needmore and Hygiene.
Yeah, it would make sense. Yeah. I mean, you could have the Needmore Hygiene metro area at that point.
Yeah, and then we, of course, got zero originality. No Name, Colorado.
Yep. We have in Austin, we have a No Name Road.
Oh, so okay. There you go. And then we got Butternuts, New York. I don't know if that was a joke or if that was someone's last name. I am aware of Y, Arizona.
Why?
Smut Eye, Alabama on the bottom. Yum Yum, Tennessee, and Dingdong, Texas. Where is Dingdong, Texas, by the way?
I have no freaking clue where it is. I've never even heard of Dingdong, Texas. But what you don't have in here is Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, which named itself after the TV show or the game show back in the day. And I'm looking at the list here. I'm trying to find Toadsuck, Arkansas, which is an area that I used to work in. Here. How could you not have Toadsuck, Arkansas?
I will tell you, because this is my next slide, and the main reason why I wanted to do this is because, for the most part, I spent a good chunk of my life in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Even growing up as a teenage boy, you always laughed at this name of a town in Pennsylvania. It is not one of the top 75.
Huh.
The best name for a town is Intercourse, Pennsylvania.
I've heard of that. Which the funniest part is it's in the Amish area, which is hilarious.
Little west, but near. So here's Philadelphia. All right. So here, this is where it is. This is about 2.5 hours west of Philadelphia. Now, I thought what was interesting about Intercourse is that Virginia is for lovers, but Pennsylvania has Intercourse.
As an
In
intercourse,
case you
yes,
wanted your
that is awesome.
T-shirt to go
The
to the
greatest
merchandise
t-shirt
shop.
ever.
And
Yeah,
just in case you could speak to this woman about Intercourse information,
apparently. Yep.
and just in case you want to drive around in the merchandise shop, you can get a license plate that just says,
I love
"I
intercourse.
love
Pennsylvania.
Intercourse."
I love this. This is awesome. I love
Yeah,
it. Formerly,
you got a good name, but come on, this is the best town name in America. And
it's
actually, I got to
awesome.
tell you, when I looked at the list, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, maybe they changed the name of the town, and of course they did not, because you can imagine every T-shirt store on the corner there, it's got to be selling something.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that I love the sign up there that you've got that says, formerly it was called Cross Keys from a noted old tavern stand. So you're sitting there going, okay, it's Cross Keys. What are we going to rename this town? What do we want to tell to the world? Intercourse. How about that?
And if you notice when it was founded, it was before the Revolutionary War and
Yeah.
before we were basically
Yeah.
formed as a union. So
Yeah.
it
Even
goes
before
back a
we were
ways.
thinking about it at that point, that's back in the French and Indian War time.
Yeah. All
Wow.
right, getting on to more serious stuff. Conference board, some interesting things here. Now, the CEO confidence. Now, this was obviously from April,
Yeah.
but even with a nice bounce back in late April and into May, the CEO confidence is down. And we had talked about this in our pregame that if you were a CEO or CFO that is a multinational company, you still don't know what the tariffs could or may not be. So, how can you go to investors on quarterly earnings calls and say, hey, this is what we expect top line, but there is no way you could say bottom line. You got to give a wide range. So,
Yeah.
I thought that CEO confidence was interesting. And then the other one here on the right basically goes through the risks, right? Obviously, geopolitical instability will always be on this chart, but look how high it is.
Yeah.
Trade tariffs, number two. And whenever I talk to clients and meetings and whatever, these are the top two things that
Sure.
worry us. Ray
Yeah.
Dalio was all going on every news channel talking about this. I don't know what you find the most interesting here, but
What I don't think is I don't really think it's surprising. It's what I would expect at this point. They don't know they don't know how this is going to work out. And basically the administration has said, trust us, it'll work. Trust us. And anytime Washington comes to you and says, trust us, you got to get your hackles up a little bit there. I think the only thing we can equate to this is how it worked out in the first administration. Although we didn't have all this tariff stuff, it worked out. And you got a whole bunch of things that are coming down the pike between the hopefully getting all this tariff stuff worked out in the next, let's say, 6 weeks, and which I don't think is going to happen, but I think you may get a little bit more worked out before then. And the other side of it is the whole tax situation. And I think leading up to that, it's going to be back and forth and fighting. And you've got Elon Musk on his side saying stuff, and you've got, and I respect Elon, but I don't think he really understands how Washington works. And it's okay, they can't do everything in this one bill. They've got to do it in several different things down the pike here. Are they going to? Once again, you got to listen to trust us, we're going to do it. Who knows? But the reality is, I think there's a lot of things coming down the pike for the next, let's call it 6 to 8 weeks. I think it's anybody's game. And I think if I was a CEO or a CFO, I'd be answering the same way I've heard all of them, which is, I got no idea. So
well,
all I can say is,
with Musk, like him, love him, hate him, whatever. How can anybody get excited about, hey, we found cuts, whether they're legit or not? Let's just say the majority of them are. Let's just say, how can you get excited about cuts and reducing waste, and then all of a sudden look at a new tax bill that increases spending?
yeah, yep.
I understand where he's coming from because he's not the only one. There's a lot of people in Congress,
No,
both
you've
sides
got
that aren't
several
happy.
senators that are that way. They're like, okay, what are we cutting? I don't see us cutting anything. Yes, we're spending more money on defense, and we're spending more money on, I personally think on the defense side, let's look at your defense budget and see where you can cut some shit out of there, because it's been the most inefficient process for procurement for the last 40, 50 years. They've been immensely inefficient in the way they procure things. Programs take 10 years to come out, and the thing is basically inferior by the time it comes out. So
Yeah, I agree.
yeah.
And then I just have a real quick, we're not going to be able to hit all these, but
Yeah.
personal consumption is going up. That's
Mhm.
another reason why our market keeps going up. Retail sales control versus census and JP Morgan Chase card tracker. I thought this is interesting as the census is moving down. Credit cards are basically staying pretty steady.
Yeah.
And on the right-hand side, this is Bank of America's credit card spending by sector. Airlines,
Yeah.
department store. This surprised me. Home improvement is always pretty steady and
Yeah, that's down.
trending to the
Yeah, I think on the airline side, I've personally just seen from pricing airline tickets and stuff like that, because we're traveling a little bit later on in the year. So we've been pricing airline tickets, and they are less than they were when we flew last year to the same location at the same time. So I think that's part of that. I don't know why. Gas is down, yeah, but I don't think that's really had that much effect, but prices seem to be down a little bit.
Yeah, but spring and summer is when people do home improvement.
Yeah, but look at this. This is all, yeah, I mean, that's the one that concerns me more than anything, because that's telling me, okay, that's a real estate problem too. And talking to my realtor buddies, they were saying this was like the worst spring selling season that they've seen in probably 4 to 5 years. And that includes the pandemic and everything else.
The rates are so high,
Yeah.
nobody's selling their house.
And I think the other part is people are just, from talking to my one realtor buddy that I run a group with, what he was saying is it's just people are like paralyzed in making a decision. It really has nothing to do with interest rates or anything like that. It's just like they're paralyzed to make any kind of a decision at this point. So they're just not moving or not putting their house up for sale.
That is, there's not enough inventory that if you're going to sell, what are you going to buy?
That's correct.
And then if you are going to sell, if somebody's got to finance it, who wants to pay 7%?
Yeah. And the reality is people are having to bring down, if they're forced to sell, they're really having to bring down the price of their houses right now. And it's funny because I just did a tax protest here in Austin, and first off, they were just insane on their valuation of my house. But just looking at the spike that happened kind of 2021, 2022 on their chart, literally my house went up like $250,000 in value according to them during the pandemic, and then now it's down actually below it was where it was before the pandemic hit.
You put in the appeal and you fight it.
Yeah. Oh, I did. Yeah, and I got a massive reduction. I didn't. If you search for tax protest using AI and my name, you can read an article that I wrote about that, where I used AI to actually do this and ended up saving myself probably about $12,000 a year. So
there you go.
Well, cool. Let me share with my stuff. What I'm going to talk about a little bit today is what I'm seeing. I just want to go through the Fed's stuff that they look at and talk about. They're apparently data dependent. So when we look at all this, and we've been talking about, are they going to raise rates? Are they going to lower rates? Are they going to stay the same? I'm going to walk through these numbers in the way they show today. And
wait a minute. Look, oh, you got your Dingdong.
Yes, I wanted to make sure we knew that. Dingdong, Texas is.
Hold on. So what city is that near?
Okay, so here's where I am right now. It's
north of Austin.
So it's north of me. It's south of, or just close to Temple, Texas, Killeen. And if you know about the military, Fort Cavazos is here. It used to be called Fort Hood, Texas. And so it's right there in literally the middle of nowhere. There is nothing in Dingdong, Texas, except for longhorn cows.
You got to be a ding-dong to live there.
You got to be a ding-dong to live there. And apparently there's nothing but cows that live there. I think I've driven through that area once or twice, and I totally agree with that picture. It's nothing but cows. All right. So looking at this week's economic calendar, nothing earth-shattering. We had the ones that really say something. ISM Manufacturing Index, it was nothing exciting. Petroleum status report, although they say this is red, which means it's like a super important thing, nobody gives a crap. It seems like I don't ever hear anybody talking about it. Probably the biggest one this week was jobless claims and the JOLTS report, which we'll go through here in a second. And then tomorrow, employment situation. So we'll get a little bit of a take on the employment situation. So let's walk through some of these charts. This first of is the JOLTS report, which is the job openings and labor turnover survey. If you guys remember back in the day when we were talking about this, it hit its absolute high point in roughly April of 2022. We had 12 million job openings. This was, if you remember back during the pandemic, when you drove down every street, it seemed like every low-end service place had help wanted, now hiring signs. Everywhere you look, there was that. Over the last several years, we've seen that number decrease. So job openings now are right around 7.3 million. At the high point, they were upwards of almost 12 million. At that point, 12,134,000. The bottom line here is total non-farm hires, which if you look at this,
you got to share your screen. Did you not share it?
Oh, it should be shared. Can you not see it?
No.
Huh. Okay, let me unshare and reshare. Okay. Share. Can you see that?
I can. There we go.
Okay. All right. Let me actually increase the size of this chart just slightly here. And that should help this be. I guess it's not going to go up here. Oh, there we go. All right. So here's our little chart. If you look at this top piece, this is the job openings. So this is open jobs that they're trying to fill. Like I said, hit the highest point around 12 million, somewhere around March 2022. And it's been on a steady decline since then. This week's JOLTS report, basically in line with where it's been, 7.4, let's call it, at that point. So that's been going. Here's the interesting thing. If you watch the bottom line here, this is the actual hires. You know, if you look at this over time, it's been on this steady little rise, and it's actually been on a decline here this year. And of course, the job openings have been declining as well. So if you talk to my recruiter friends that I have here working in my office and things like that, you're starting to see they're just, especially in the high tech areas, it's been much less. There's more people I'm talking to that have been looking for a job. I think it's relatively easy to get a job on the low end in the service industries, but some of the more skilled, especially tech areas, it's getting a little bit harder to find jobs. So that's an interesting thing to look at. The unemployment rate, we were talking about this previously. So if you look at the long-term unemployment rate, of course, when we're out here around July of 2021, it was massively up there. It was 14% up there. If you look at it over the last 3 years, I looked at 1 year here. Okay, it's about the same. But if you look at 3 years, that's been going up, and it's getting upwards, or it's getting up to where the Fed would say, hey, we're at full employment or whatever in their world today. Used to be 6-7% was the unemployment rate. Now it's, they say 5. We're getting closer to 5, and we've been on a steady rise toward that. Let's look at another number that they look at, the PCE. This is the one that they look at primarily. If you look at it over 5 years, we were at the high point about 7.2% in June of 2022. It's been slowly going down. But we're getting closer to their target number, which is 2%. At least that's what they say. We look over 3 years, we're steadily declining. We're getting close to that 2% number that they're wanting, at least on the PCE side. All right, so here is CPI, which was interesting to me because I thought CPI was going down. But if you look at CPI, it's been slowly creeping up. So this might be, if they said they were data dependent and they used this number, I could argue the point. Maybe we're seeing inflation flying into the market and we shouldn't reduce interest rates at this point. But look at PPI now. So here's producer price index over the last 3 years, and it went way below in April, down to negative 0.5%, which tells us that the lead end of the market, which theoretically should be the ones that are experiencing all the tariffs and inflation and all that, Well, producer prices are reducing pretty significantly here, which should roll back out to us in the real world. So last but not least, let's look at the Treasury yield curve. And what I did is I marked 3 different places on the yield curve chart, which I didn't know you could do this. You could pin these, which saves me from having to jump back and forth between them. But, the different ones that are on here. So this red one is the interest rate on May 1st, 2025. So here's where we were. The Fed funds rate basically is where it is at. The longer end of the curve, the 20-year and the 10-year, or the 20 and the 30-year, now are higher than where they were. So that's the bond market saying, hey, we think that with all the spending that the world is going to end and all that. Who knows if they're the smartest guys in the room? I don't know. 10-year hasn't really changed dramatically, although if you listen to the news, they would tell you that the world is ending and interest rates are going through the roof, but they really haven't changed. And they're in this range that the Fed likes to see, which is that block.
Yep.
So all of that said, if I were a betting man, I would say that probably we need to start thinking about reducing interest rates at this point, because if we're data dependent, we're going to follow that. What do I think is going to happen? I think the Fed, I've seen this movie before. I think the Fed's going to sit on their hands and wait and wring their hands and everything else until it gets too late and the economy starts to slow even more. And we start to see less jobs and everything else because of the uncertainty. Part of that's the administration, I totally admit. But part of that is the Fed holding these rates freaking pretty high. Quite frankly, they're historically not high, but if you look at the last, let's say 20 years, they're up there when it comes to that. And
right, but also people are still spending.
Yeah.
Banks are still loaning money even with interest rates this high. So obviously, because it's been a while since they lowering a quarter of a point isn't going to do anything except psychological.
Yeah.
But if they do it a couple of meetings in a row, that's something different. If they wanted to lower it a quarter of a point to see the effect of it, that's one thing. But as we know, until some of these tariff agreements are signed, I don't see why they would want to lower rates with the risk of inflation. And here's the thing, we won't know really in the next 3 to 4 months. We're going to know when it comes holiday season.
Yeah. Which we will. And we might see prices rise. We might see inflation go up at that point. I think one of the challenges that we're going to see is we're so reliant, certain industries are so reliant on China. And if you look at the percent, or if you look at the number of the number of container ships and things like that, I heard something on the news when I was driving the other day that typically per month we got 60 to 65 container ships in to US ports, and it's down to 30 to 35 at this point, in the period where a lot of these companies are stocking up for the Christmas season and things like that. I just look at it like our local Hobby Lobby, because my wife is a crafter, so we're in there quite often. And just looking at the shelves in Hobby Lobby right now, they're just not as filled or stocked with certain products like like fake flowers and stuff like that. They're just not anywhere near as stocked as they were before. So I don't know if that's an effect of some of this stuff going on with China and all that. Who knows? Yeah. It's one of those weird one-offs that I would say that I could see being a major factor later on in the year that might cause inflation to go up. But like I said, I've just seen this movie happen too many times in my career, where the Fed just hand wrings, and then all of a sudden it's, oh crap, now everything's slowed down. Now we've got to make changes. And Powell's going into his last year as Fed chair, and he wants his legacy to be that he was the greatest mind that's ever been in that chair. And who knows?
He doesn't seem like a narcissist like that.
I don't know. He's been a little narcissistic with some of the stuff he's come out with that typically, and we've seen a couple of these. Greenspan was narcissistic as hell.
Oh yeah.
And I think in some weird ways Yellen was, but I just never quite got her. But
No.
yeah, I
They,
mean,
they were both academics.
yeah,
Both,
very,
and Yellen, they were academics.
yeah, yeah. At least Powell is at least a market guy. But there's times where I look at him and I'm like, okay, why do you need to say that? There's no need to. Just report the data and share it with us. And you don't need to give an opinion in a lot of cases.
But that's what the media wants. They
Of
want
course
an
they do.
opinion.
Of course they do, but you need to.
But he does sidestep a lot of the
He
grenade
does.
questions because and this is the whole thing, and I know we got to go here, but I think one of my favorite things to that is think about like when they're doing the presser, they
Yeah.
all these people from the US and around the world, and now you get the microphone. It's your chance. You got one question.
Yep.
And you ask him a question that you know he can't answer. That is your one opportunity to ask a
Yeah.
question and you know he can't answer. So when are you going to lower rates? Hey,
Yeah.
Schmuck, we can't answer that. We'll decide in our next meeting.
It's data dependent.
Next question. You've been there all day. Your media company paid for you to go.
Yes.
And asked a question that you knew
You
he
asked the
couldn't answer.
dumbest question you possibly can ask ever. Yeah, I don't put the media past just some of the dumbest people I've ever seen get those jobs, especially in the like government coverage like that. They're some of the dippiest people I've ever seen. Just why would you
get a breaking story?
Do you think?
Right.
Yeah. Do you think he's going to go? Huh? I've never said
That's
where
a great
rates are going to
question.
go. Yeah. Great question. I think we're going to do. No, he's never going to say that. There is no Fed chairman ever that is going to say that. Yeah. So why keep asking that same stupid ass question?
All right.
All right, folks, we do these shows for you. Hopefully this was fun and you've got some new names of cities that you can enjoy. Hopefully this gave you some data. I don't know if I convinced you one way or another, but it's how I see it when it comes to this. And a lot of great information from Ron. Like I said, the big concern I have is that one column in that chart that you had, Ron, which was the spending on home improvement, because that tells a lot. Now, it also may tell the fact that people did a lot of home improvement during the pandemic and they just don't have anything else left if they're not moving.
There's always something to do.
Oh, I know. It's like a never ending story. All right, guys, thanks a lot. And we will see you guys back here the very next time.